Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. We crack the code so you don't have to.
Welcome to the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. I am delighted to bring someone who is a guru in books and publishing to our program. As you know, we want to make sure that you get good content. What we provide, first of all, is all free. But we would like for you to make sure you're sending the podcast out to your friends, subscribing and liking us, and tuning in every single week as we bring to you some of the most innovative leaders in the entire country, if not the world. We have with us Emily Bestler. Emily, welcome.
Thank you.
So you're the Senior Vice President and Editor-in-Chief of Emily Bestler Books, but you have a long history of working in the publishing industry. But tell me about your company.
All right. Happy to. Yes, I have been in publishing for about 30 years now. My imprint, Emily Bestler Books, is probably about a decade old now. And that really just began because more and more the kind of publishing I was doing is very boutique.
Right.
And I really needed the space and freedom to go find the books that I want to publish and the books I want to publish.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell me about it. That was one of the big questions I have. How do you find and select the books that you like to publish? And not every book is the same. Everyone has maybe their perspective on the types of book, the genre, the topics that are discussed. But tell me how that process works for you.
Well, I will say, yes, publishing is so subjective.
Right.
So, and that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it a horse race. But for me, I publish commercial fiction. I'm interested in finding books that will appeal to a lot of people and sell a lot of copies. And growing up, I grew up in a very, very teeny town in Virginia.
Oh,
and Martinsville, Virginia,
okay.
for anyone.
I'm from Virginia.
What? Where are you from?
I am. I'm from Hampton Roads area, but I know Martinsville very well. I went to school in Blacksburg.
Oh, okay. I love a fellow Virginian.
Yes.
So, yes, I grew up in Martinsville, and there were no bookstores, and there was a teeny library, but and there were books in the grocery store, and I grew up going to that little library and having my mom buy me books in the grocery store.
Okay.
And that was, that's where I read it all.
Right.
I read everything I could get my hands on. And then, of course, following in the footsteps of many publishers before me, I was an English major.
Okay.
And I got my master's in English. I moved to New York for college. But of course, then went into publishing because if you love books, and you live in New York City, that is a very natural path.
That's an epicenter for books, right?
Yeah. And also there's absolutely nothing else I could ever have done but be an editor. So that was just a foregone conclusion. It was foretold, as they say. Right. So, but for me, even though I live and work in New York, I am definitely not one of those ivory tower sorts of publishers.
Okay.
I am Middle America. I grew up in Middle America. Those are my tastes. If I love a book, there's a good chance that a whole lot of other people will too. And so I just kept in touch with that element of myself. And when I buy a book, I have that confidence that I couldn't put it down. And I think a lot of people are going to agree with me.
Well, it's really special. When you find a book that keeps you reading, that you cannot put it down, it's a special moment.
It is. And I think a lot of people in publishing can be easily led astray by, saying, oh, romantasy is working, so I'm going to buy romantasy books.
Right.
Or horror is working. I don't read horror, but I'm going to start buying horror. And you can't do it that way. You can't publish. First of all, by the time it's a trend, it's too late.
Right.
But also you just can't fake it that way because you're no judge. If you haven't read, a million thrillers, you're no judge.
Right.
So I don't want to hear what you have to say about it. I don't want to take your word for it. So I buy what I.
What's neat as well, though, is that, and I hear this from a lot of business people, that if you follow your passion into a business, then you'll do well. But you have to really like your product. You have to like what you want to do. You have to be a consumer of your product for those people that do well. Yeah,
absolutely. And for me, my value to the company is my opinion.
Right.
And if I'm wrong often enough, then I'll get the boot. But that's why I'm there. I'm there for my opinion. And after I give my opinion, then I'm there for my negotiating skills and I'm there for my editing skills.
Right.
Because if I get a manuscript, I bought them, say, but buy a manuscript. I love it. It needs work, or it comes in needing more work than I thought. Or it's an author's third book and, they went a little astray. I have to turn that book into its very best self. So if I say I get a manuscript and I think to myself, it's kind of like a B- right now. My goal is to, with the author, turn it into an A.
Right.
And that's another, that's value added for the company when I take something and turn it into, spin that dross into gold, basically.
Now, I want to ask you this because you mentioned this earlier. I think this is insightful for me. And you spoke about Middle America and how that played into your evolution. Martinsville is a very small community. If you look at the 2020 census, the population is only about 13,000, which is probably more than it was when I was growing up. But that is absolute Middle America. And I presume the values that you learned there and what you experienced in a small community really set the stage for, and you spoke about your experience with your mom, of course, but tell us about what Middle America feels like for you and how you mentioned that experience gave you the ability to connect with normal people, right? Which is a really big deal when it comes to publishing and yeah.
That's so funny because, I have often, and I mean, I love New York and I will never leave New York.
Right.
I truly, truly love New York. I have often found myself saying to people or thinking to myself, have you ever met a normal person? You don't sound like you have.
Right.
And, or have you ever met somebody who just, doesn't have 3 degrees?
Exactly.
Because you seem like you're a little afraid of everyone else in the country.
Well, and in those communities though, and I loved it growing up where everyone says hello to you. I remember when I moved out to California and I would talk to people and they look at me like I was strange. It's just a good morning or how are you doing? And it was a different experience. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing.
Absolutely. When I first moved to New York, I had to learn not to make too much eye contact. But you make eye contact, as you know, with the wrong person, that person will be following you for the next 10 blocks.
That is very true.
On the other hand, there's so much to be said for talking to other people. And some of my very best conversations are with just regular people like me who I just meet along the way. And, my cab driver or the person next to me on the plane or, and that's how I want to say keep in touch, but I don't need to keep in touch. I am just a normal person.
Right.
But they're the ones who are out there shaping. Ultimately, they're the ones. If they don't like what I buy, then I'm out of a job.
Right.
And you can't undermine, that's the other thing. I think a lot of people undermine the, quote unquote, general public, whereas they're the ones.
Exactly.
They called it. They call it. You can't pretend. You can't fake it. You can't say, here's a great thriller. And because I'm so smart, I'm telling you, you're going to love it.
Right.
Well, good luck with that.
And it's interesting because one of the first comments that I received when we were looking at building a business podcast, as I was learning kind of the details of social media, is someone says you have to make sure that you're authentic on the program, that they have to be real conversations. So we're not scripted on the show. I didn't give you the questions and the content exactly that we're going to speak about. And I think people appreciate having the honest conversations, much like your books. You can't really fake the book. People want to know that it's real, that they wrote it, that it's that there's some value in what they're reading and enjoyment in what they're reading. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also in terms of, faking it or not faking it, for example, I can give you a real life example. One of my authors, Vince Flynn, he since passed away, but he was a huge still is a huge #1 bestseller for me, because we now have a wonderful co-writer. He had this fantastic scene in a novel where a father and son are out in the countryside, shooting turkeys. And we published that book. And they get assassinated by a bad guy. So it's this really horrific, scary, moving scene.
Right.
We get a letter from a guy who goes, "You would never hunt turkeys with that rifle. It's wrong quality rifle. You would just explode them."
Right.
And Vince was like, "Damn it," because he's trying to do all this research, but this guy called him on. We fixed it. We fixed it in the preprint. But, these authors, the ones who are working, the level of research that goes into what somebody ostensibly might think is a sort of it's a thriller.
Right.
No.
I just saw a book that was released, and something similar to what you mentioned. The picture of the book didn't align properly with the material. And so the feedback was really, really tough on this book. Like, that picture scene is contradictory to the message in the book. So you're right. You've got to get those little details right, like what you mentioned with the gun.
Yeah, because the book buyers are smart and they read a ton of books.
Right.
So their judgment is not to be toyed with. They're experts on the genres they're reading. And it's really interesting to, I'm always looking for new authors, and it's really interesting to see how a new author in a genre, say, I have an author named Marcus Cleaver, and his first book was We Used to Live Here. And what you have to do if you're breaking into a genre is you need to keep the tropes, because if I read a lot of horror, for example, if a reader does that, I read a ton of horror myself for pleasure. I know what I want. There's tropes that, don't give me, for example, a vampire who likes to eat fruit. I'm not happy. I need my vampire in the coffin. I need him to, I need the stake through the heart. You need that stuff. But then within those parameters, making it fresh is a huge challenge, and it's the difference between succeeding or not.
So you started your company in 2011, but before that, you worked at some of the biggest names in book publishing. Can you tell us about those organizations and how you ended up getting those jobs? Like, in fact, what was your first job coming out of college with your English degree?
My first job. Believe me, and those were before there were such things as, job counselors at colleges.
Right.
And no internet, so no research. Anyway, so I got a book. The only thing was a book called The Literary Marketplace, which still exists. And it lists all the publishers in America. You can get an international one too, and all the agents. And so I just started alphabetically sending letters to so you
were typing letters and sending them to those. Wow. I remember those days. I had a word processor before computers came out, and I was advanced back then. So we went from typewriter to my word processor. I could only see 3 lines of type on a monochrome, just a black and white screen. So I remember. And correction tape was my friend back then.
Oh, my God. So my first job was at a place, alphabetically speaking, Chelsea House. Okay. So I got the A's and the B's. I don't know who those were, but Chelsea House was probably one of the first places I wrote to. And it was an academic publisher, therefore completely not what I wanted to be doing. I didn't even know that when I went there. That was a person who's getting no advice whatsoever.
Right.
But then I realized, oh, wait a minute. I don't want to be in in academic publishing. So then I went to what was then Macmillan.
Okay.
From Macmillan, I went to Random House, and that's when I really realized. I went as an assistant to Random House, and I realized along that way that I really wanted to do commercial fiction.
Right. Okay.
Eventually moved to Simon and Schuster, and really began acquiring it, and really had a lot of good luck with it. I used to be 50-50. I used to do half nonfiction, and I had a lot of luck with that. But eventually I'm basically only submitted fiction now, because that's what my brand has become.
Okay. That's impressive. So I've looked at some of your list of books, and you have some major books. And I know you alluded to this earlier, that you want books that a lot of people will read. Can you tell us about some of those books? I know Brad Thor is one in your collection, right? He's a #1 New York Times bestselling author as well. But tell us about some of those books, because they're really incredible. So, what's interesting? This is probably like a lot of movie stars. You look at the big name, big build movie stars, and they have these movies. You don't know necessarily the people behind making those movies work well. You're that person. Like you're like the Steven Spielberg behind the scenes making great work happen. But you have some incredible titles.
I do. I'm so lucky. Brad Thor, I just finished editing his 27th book with me.
Wow.
And believe it or not, it's his best book ever.
Okay.
So it's pretty phenomenal that an author of that caliber can keep getting better, because it's very hard.
Well, and don't leave Brad Thor yet. So his 27th book with you, but can you tell the listener, I've been asking people how much they know about Brad Thor and his books, but can you walk through any of the numbers of his books, how many sold, and how big of an author is? He's amazing.
Oh my goodness. I don't have the numbers. I can say millions, but I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. But he has for many years now been a #1 New York Times bestseller. And he started, from scratch, obviously. And I actually got his novel from a sales rep for Simon & Schuster who met him on a train in Europe.
Oh, how funny.
And they got to talking, and Brad said he wanted to be an author. And the sales rep said, well, send it to me if you ever write that book. And he did. And then I went to sales conference, and this sales rep said, Emily, I have this manuscript. I met this guy. He was on his honeymoon. I met him on a train in Europe.
Interesting.
And would you read it? And I said, sure. And then it sat on my shelf for 6 months because, a lot of people say, would you?
Right.
And then I was about to see it at another sales conference, and I thought, I have got to read this thing. I can't face her if I haven't read it.
Right.
And I read it in practically one setting, and his phone number was on the front page of the manuscript, and I called him up.
Wow. Okay.
To Brad Thor.
That's hilarious.
And he goes, oh, speaking, who is it? And I said, it's Emily Bestler. He goes, Emily Bestler, Vince Flynn's publisher. I said, yes. Anyway, I bought that book because it was a fantastic debut. And that was just pure serendipity.
So that was his first book. So you've been with him from the beginning. What was it that made that manuscript special, especially as a first-time author? You know, a lot of those first books aren't necessarily special. You might see glimmers of opportunity there. But what stood out with his?
Well, that's it. That's that quality, that storytelling quality.
Okay.
You either have it or you don't have it.
Gotcha.
You know, look back many, many thousands of years, and there was a guy sitting around the campfire with a bunch of other, ancient humans, and he was the one who had the great stories.
Gotcha.
And everyone, tell us about that tiger hunt. And he knew how to tell a story. We all know people who are like that.
Right.
And writers are in that league. So you either are a good storyteller or you're not. You can't fake that. You can't learn it. You can learn some, ins and outs, maybe, but you can't learn that magic.
Right.
I can't do it.
Right.
I can do that. So he had it. So I read that manuscript and I'm just being pulled along like a bead on a string because he had that innate ability to make me want to keep going.
Right.
And that when I see that, I'm sold.
Yeah.
I'm sold.
I often think about J.K. Rowling. I know that she went through in her early days that I think her book sat for quite a while and no one would really pick it up. But you think when you look back now at a Brad Thor or J.K. Rowling and you think, oh my gosh, they probably started writing and publishing books at 2 because they're so good and they've been doing it so long. But it's not easy getting a book published.
No, it's not. But if you want to write, if you're a writer, you cannot help yourself. You have to write.
Right.
And you're thinking about it all the time. It's just in your DNA.
Right.
But it's very common that publishing history is replete with stories of books that got rejected 20 times. Now became huge bestsellers.
And and I want to get back to some of the other authors that you have, but that's a great comment there for our listeners that are looking to start a business or build a business or even grow their careers, that getting that no is not uncommon. Right. Even for the people that we look at now, like a J.K. Rowling or a Brad Thor, it's not uncommon to get that no. And it just requires you persevering and trying to figure out another path. It's like you writing a letter to the company, a handwritten or a typewritten letter in the early days saying, I want to join your organization. It takes that. So today, if you send an email, I was talking to a business owner whose business is actually doing really well. And I asked her, how many rejections did you get before you found an investor? And it was well over 100. And you would think by the 10th one, you are demoralized and you think no one really wants what I'm looking to sell, but you have to keep at it, right?
I give that advice to aspiring writers all the time. Do not give up. And you need an agent, first of all, and spread that net wide because you can go through 20 no's before you click with the right agent or the agent who has the exact right vision. And it's same with submitting your when an agent submits a manuscript because, there can be 10 editors in editorial row and they're all very different people with different experiences. And 9 of them would say no. And the 10th one would say, I love this thing. I have to buy it.
Or, they say, I see the opportunity. Even if it's not a love, but I see the opportunity to create something great, right?
Yeah, I see what this could be. Why don't you consider this? Vince Flynn, he had, I feel as if almost everyone in town said no to his first novel.
Right.
And then he got a new agent and the agent sent it to me and, the next day, practically, I was like, I have to buy it. And he's a perfect example of somebody who, not the most polished of writers in the beginning, but very grassroots, telling a story. His first novel was about a person out there in Washington who was basically killing congressmen who didn't keep their campaign promises.
Interesting.
I don't know if you could publish that book now, but
Right.
our ad slogan was "Taking America Back, One Politician at a Time."
Very interesting.
So
So what happened to that one?
That was the beginning of his career.
Okay.
That was the very beginning of his career. And in very short order, he was the number one New York Times bestselling author for us. And I kept on saying to people, he's just talking to every American. These were political thrillers.
Sure.
He's just talking to every American who, at night in their kitchen goes, what is it with these politicians?
Right.
Why don't they do what they say? Or why aren't they doing anything? And his very first New York Times bestseller happened right after 9/11.
Oh, okay.
And People magazine did not want to review it because they thought it was too sensitive, because it's a political thriller.
Sure.
And people are getting killed. His books have a high body count.
Right.
And I said, my God, are you kidding? Like, every American is so traumatized.
Right.
This is the book they're going to want to read because we win.
Right.
Like, we're not winning right now, but we win in this book.
Right.
It's going to make people feel great. It's like vicarious living through the trauma. And it has a much happier ending than that current trauma did. And in fact, that was his first New York Times bestseller, although people wouldn't run the review.
Interesting. That's pretty amazing just to see. Did you ever have a conversation at some point when the reviews wouldn't occur and it was, let's stick with it, let's stay the course, and then you were vindicated later just in sales and recognition?
Love that vindication. It's so fun.
Yeah.
But I'm always looking for new, because I need my backbench. I need to be developing them. But I have so many authors whose Jack Carr's another one, big number one New York Times bestseller for us. And I got Jack Carr's manuscript on a recommendation from a very, I'm not sure if he wants to be mentioned or not, so I won't, but a very good friend of mine and author. And, same thing. I read it and I just was instantly convinced that this was the real deal. And you have to have that confidence. And by the way, I'm wrong all the time too.
How so?
Well, you can't be in publishing and be right all the time because we are guessing. It's a huge guess. We don't do polls. We don't do all those fancy things because we're book publishing.
Right. Well, it's interesting though. You say that, but in many ways, you are like an investor, a traditional financial investor that is taking, or private equity company that's taking a gamble on a company that they're looking to buy, because you're buying this manuscript with the hope that it will grow and resonate well with the clients. But it's very much the same way. And every investment doesn't produce positive results for those private equity companies.
Right. We are placing a bet. But unlike perhaps much, much bigger businesses, we're not doing that deep research. We can't. Right. We can't do that deep research. Sure. It's a book.
Right.
And it's often a day.
So you're not looking at a P&L for your writers. Relative to the book being successful in the marketplace. It's just hard, to your point. Yes.
But it often takes 5 books for somebody to make it.
Sure.
So if I feel, I'm not the only one who does this, but if I feel that the author's doing their job, i.e. they've just written a fantastic book, I don't care about the sales because I know it can take 5 books for somebody to hit it big, and I will stick with them.
Okay.
Because they've done their job and I have that faith. That doesn't mean it always does work out. It certainly does not. But, we're there. It sounds a little bit too romantic, but I feel that way. I'm, really there to make their dreams come true. And I'm going to work really, really hard. Now, I don't want to make anyone's dreams come true who also aren't going to make my dreams come true, which is making a lot of money for the company and the author and the agent.
Right.
But that's what I want for them. I want their success, and we all work very hard.
Right. And that's an interesting point you mentioned, though, because I have a few friends that have written their first book, and the book one is very important for them. They're telling maybe their story or their set of ideas, but they expect the first one to be a home run. And you're right. It can take a few books to get there.
I know. It's so hard because then they'll say, oh, Emily, I feel like I let you down.
Right.
And I always say, no, the reader let me down. I blame the reader.
Right.
You should let me down. You wrote a great book. We'll get there.
Very interesting. So who are some of the other authors that you've been working with? Again, your list. So Emily, this is interesting for me. I want you to list some of the authors, but more than that, the community that you're touching from publishing books is large. Like, you have a lot of great books in your portfolio. And I find that remarkable. People think of the big names, the Simon & Schusters from the publishing standpoint, but your access and influence is just huge in the world of books.
Thank you. I am a huge generalist. That's how I read. There's nothing I will, if I don't have anything else to read, I'll read the back of a cereal box. I read nonfiction. I read it all for pleasure all the time.
Okay.
Because how can I judge if I'm not reading what's working out there? I can't. And you can lose touch if you only read submissions.
True.
But so generalist, I do have, I have political thrillers. I have horror. I have suspense. I have rom-com. I have domestic suspense. And that's because I read very widely in all of those areas. And so I feel confident and privileged, really, to be able to sort of spread my net rather widely. And like I said, I always have a lot of great debut authors coming up. Tell me about some of those upcoming ones. I was looking at some of the lists of recently reviewed books. So John Connolly's on the list, Marcus Kluwer is on the list, and T.J. Alexander. And I have new authors. They're a married couple. So we're calling them KB Brodsky. And their first novel is called Beyond Honor. Okay. And I'm publishing that in 26. And it reads, you would never believe it was debut. It is.
Wow.
Is unputdownable. And the reviews are already pouring in. This is their first book. They've had careers that had nothing to do with book publishing.
Okay.
And then they wrote this thing, and yeah, same thing. I just read it and I called the agent and I said, okay, sign me up. This is good. And, thank God my instincts are proving correct. Cause as I said, the early reviews are already, coming in, and they are absolutely fantastic. But it's debut. And so there's not a whole lot we can do beyond getting that groundswell growing. I say there's not a whole lot. We do a ton, but in terms of it's incredibly difficult to get, a giant airport display for a debut novel,
right? Which
you can do with somebody who's well known.
Now, you mentioned agents quite a few times. For those that are listening that are thinking about the book process, what role does that agent play? You mentioned that they need to have an agent, and I've seen so many people try to self-publish their books. They don't have an agent. How does that agent play a role for them, and how can they find a suitable agent?
The reason you need an agent is that there are multiple reasons, and I adore the agents I work with. You need, as an author, someone who's totally on your side.
Right. That's
their whole job. So and they represent you to the company, and you don't want to have to do that as an author. That's what you're going to negotiate your contracts. And no, you need that. And you need that advice. Also, the agent knows who to submit your book to.
Okay.
So back to the whole 10 authors in editorial row. if you're an author, you don't know who to submit to. You might submit to somebody who only prefers, thrillers about ballerinas.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
So, but the agent you find will say, I know the best person. They will know the best person or handful of people at each house to submit to, because they know these people. They're friends with these people. They got to lunch with these people. They know their history. And so they're going to make sure that your book gets sent to the most likely person to like it and buy it.
Right.
And that's irreplaceable, because you have no idea if you're not an agent or in publishing.
Right.
And then just in terms of ongoing, like I said, contractual stuff, and if there are any difficulties, again, you don't want to be the one to have to do that. Right. So that's why it's really important. It's impossible practically to get published if you don't have an agent, unless you self-publish, which I don't have anything against. We can talk about that later.
Now let's talk about it. And that's a huge topic for me as I speak to people that are looking to publish a book. And I have a good friend who is in publishing as well, and she cringes every time she hears that someone's going to self-publish the book.
Well, you know what? Sometimes you just don't have a choice.
Right.
And I think it's perfectly viable. And I like it. I like it because for years and years and years, publishers were the gatekeepers. You couldn't get a book published if you didn't have a publisher.
Right.
I love it for authors out there that they can bypass the gatekeepers, because we could all be wrong. We have all been wrong a million times. So go out and get self-published. Now you have your book. Now you have your product. Vince Flynn was self-published.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And the bestseller lists are filled with authors who self-published their book work, and then a traditional publisher bought it.
Okay.
Atria,
yeah.
I'm a part of, bought Colleen Hoover's books. Hoover has sold 100 bazillion million books, and she's self-published.
Right.
And that's how Atria found her and contacted her.
So self-publishing is a viable option for a lot of people, which is good to hear. Yeah.
It's totally viable. And I am always very, very touched and impressed with how many people in the world want to write a book. Right. And have written a book. I find that just a beautiful thing, just beautiful that in all the distraction and the noise and the televisions and the computers, we still have so many people who say, I have a story to tell and I'm putting it in words and I want to share it.
Now, are you seeing a resurgence of printed books? I know a couple years ago when I read the article that Costco wasn't going to have books in their stores anymore, I was heartbroken because it was such a major part, especially at the holidays. You go in and see these wonderful books in Costco, and I know it takes a lot of space. But are you seeing in Barnes & Noble, they're ramping up again? It sounds like they're opening new stores. There's something special about going into a bookstore or a place that sells books and flipping through those books and feeling the paper in your hand and reading a good book.
Oh, I mean, there's just nothing like a good bookstore. Yeah, it's interesting because, right, the tides ebb and flow. So, it looked for a while as if indies were going extinct.
Right.
Yay, they're not going extinct. In fact, they're growing.
Nice.
It looked for a while as if print books in general were in trouble. And then, yay, audio became this gigantic format, which needs printed books.
Right. Right.
And sell printed books. And, audio used to be this backwater. And now it's almost a giant.
Right.
And, of course, ebooks, my goodness. That just brought books to places they've never been before. And at first it was like, are they killing the printed book? But no, they're not killing the printed book.
Right.
Yes. So just when everybody thinks, books are on the way out, something comes along, and I, of course, since I'm in publishing and a book lover, have absolutely nothing but 100% optimism that books are essential to humanity and they are not going anywhere. And I love it that new formats keep popping. Who knows what the next one will be?
Now, when you buy your manuscripts, what do you offer to that author? Are you helping with it? Do you have an entire marketing program that you're doing, or are you outsourcing that as a part of the deal?
We do everything in-house.
Okay.
So I have a fantastic marketing team and a genius publicity, and Salesforce is so aggressive and great. So, everybody weighs in and does their thing to bring a book successfully to market. And the first thing after I buy a book is to edit it. And I love to edit. And, that's step one.
Right.
And I find it to be such an enjoyable process. And 99.9% of the authors I work with also agree that it's an enjoyable process. And the 0.1% who kicked and screamed about it or didn't enjoy it didn't end up working.
Right. Now, for a lot of them, not to get too much in your contractual type details, but when you find a good book like Thor's first book, did you then sign him for multiple books at that moment just to make sure he didn't leave? That's because you make the first book successful. So you might put someone on the map, and then it's like they might leave you in the process. So.
Bummer. Well, I have to say, usually that doesn't happen because if the first book really, really works, why would you leave?
Right.
You probably wouldn't leave.
Okay.
Unless somebody stole you away because they paid you a whole lot of money. It happens.
Sure.
It definitely happens. It makes everyone sad except for the successful bidder. But you know what? Beware, authors, beware, because it's like I was just talking about this with a lawyer friend of mine who it's in the news, but I still won't talk about it.
Sure.
There's a law firm out there who was fired by their client because the law firm pointed out something that the client had done, which was potentially going to get them in trouble with the courts. And so the client, rather than taking the advice, fired the law firm and has been bad-mouthing them around town.
Oh.
And so we were saying, what law firm would ever work with this client?
Right.
Under this, why would you want to work with somebody now that you know that that's the loyalty and that's, how they take advice? And so same thing with authors. So, when an author wants to move, and the authors have a perfect right to move,
right.
And just the absolute best thing for their career. So this is by no means a blanket statement, but just to say, author beware, because if you move for the wrong reasons or too often, then the next time a publisher will say,
that last question, right?
You don't seem that loyal, and that a previous publisher seemed like they did a fantastic job. So what's the deal? And do I want to be the one who gets left at the altar next time?
Right. So, that makes sense. How many manuscripts do you think you receive in a month or so? Like, how many are reviewing, and then how many do you convert to an actual deal?
Oh gosh, I go months and months without buying a book.
Okay.
But I probably get about, 6 to 10 manuscripts a week.
Wow. Okay. A week?
Yeah,
wow.
I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long do you think those manuscripts are? So when you get 6 to 10 a week, how much of a consumption of time is it for you to read through all of those in detail?
I couldn't do that.
Okay.
Because they're full manuscripts for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy a novel on a partial. So they're full manuscripts. But just as with any, like a movie or a song or anything, if you listen to enough or see enough or read enough, you know pretty quickly.
Okay.
So I don't need to read a whole book to know, first of all, I only need to read a few pages to know if I even want to finish it.
Okay.
And that's nothing against the book, because it could be a perfect book for someone else, but maybe it's just not the right genre or attitude, or it resembles something else, or, so it's nothing against the writer whatsoever. But if I like it enough to keep going, that's a really good sign that maybe it's for me. And then I finish, then I'll finish. Or maybe I'll quit half because I'll say, it started great, but the middle is really slow. So no.
So, it's interesting because I've been working with a couple of companies recently to help them with reorganizing their business. And you're right. When you become really good at something, I was able, it's a multiple month deal, but within the first 2 to 3 days, I really knew I had a good perspective on what I needed to do to help them organize. And that just comes from 30 plus years of experience. And same thing with hiring people. When I get to an interview and hiring someone, even at the senior level, I can generally tell within the first 5 minutes of the conversation whether or not they'll make a really good fit. Again, just because I know what to look for, and I know what that process feels like, and when you find the right person.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it.
Right.
Exactly it.
I know we're near the end of our time, but how many movies have been made from your books? Not an exact number, but it sounds like you've had a number of conversions as well.
So many movies coming up. Yeah, and movies that have been done. I don't have the exact number, but for example, for my the horror imprint 1201 that I founded with Scott Glassgold last year, we've got about 6 titles in the works.
Nice.
And those are all going to become movies. The first one, The Caretaker, is starring Blake Lively.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I'm on the first one, We Used to Live Here. That was Marcus's debut novel, which I bought from a short story on Reddit.
Wow. Interesting.
Yep. The next one is starring Emma Sweeney, and that's The Caretaker. That's his second thriller. Of course, the American Assassin movies.
Right.
Vince Flynn. And then, of course, the Terminal List movies that have been gigantic for crime. Their best, their most successful movies ever. Those have happened, and they're coming up, more of them, because those are starring Chris Pratt. So yeah, I could go on, but yeah.
That's amazing. So tell me briefly then about Reddit. That's fascinating that you found a short story and converted that to a product.
Agent Liz Parker, a super genius agent Liz Parker she's now has her own agency. She was at Verve. She found this short story on Reddit by Marcus Cleaver, and it had gotten a lot of attention on Reddit, and Amazon bought it. I believe it's Amazon. It's Amazon. Bought that short story to develop into a movie in one of their biggest auctions ever.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Liz called me and said, it's a short story. How about you sign up Marcus and have him turn it into a novel?
Interesting. Okay.
And I've never done that before. And gosh, am I glad I did it. And that was kind of the genesis behind the whole 1201 imprint, because we sold hundreds of thousands of copies of his debut. So yes, really, really fun to get in, on not even the ground floor. I don't know what you call it, but basement of something.
Right. Very impressive, Emily. I was astounded by your work and your impact in the book industry. It's great meeting a fellow Virginian, by the way. It's so much fun. but with great small town values as well. I think that authenticity that you mentioned at the beginning is so incredible. And I absolutely firmly believe that in any business that anyone starts, is having that good foundation that, the old days, my grandfather was much this way. He lived by his promise and his word. Like if he said he was going to do something, he's going to do it. And I know that your business is really much the same way. And so I appreciate all that you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for having me. It's been a fun talk.
So thank you for joining us on Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman and our guest, Emily Bestler. If you need a book published, certainly look out for her website and really understand what the opportunities are as you start to build your own manuscript and book. But thanks for joining us on the Business Decoded podcast.
Stay ahead of the curve. Subscribe right now. We will see you at the next episode.